Okay, so this is the second portion of the lecture for Unit 11. And we just talked about Jesus' boyhood. All we know that he stayed behind in Jerusalem, but it was intentional. It wasn't he wasn't lost. He was in the temple asking questions and listening and answering questions and amazing people with his answers. Okay, the next question is a true or false. True or false? When Mary was told that she would become the mother of Jesus, she responded positively at the very beginning. When Mary was told that she would become the mother of Jesus, she responded positively at the very beginning. Now, there was a little bit of something similar before we answer that question. There was also an angel that appeared to a guy named Zechariah. And Zechariah, it turns out, was the father of John the Baptist. And he and his wife Elizabeth had waited a long time to have children, and they had never had children. And that was seen as kind of a curse in Jewish culture, because children were a blessing, so not having them was like a curse. And yet, what they did, an angel came to him, and an angel told Zechariah that he and his wife, that they would have a child, that Elizabeth would become pregnant. And Zechariah, he didn't respond positively right away. In fact, he said, well, how do I really know that this is going to happen? It's kind of like, how do I know that you're telling the truth? How do I know that you know what you're talking about? And the angel said, well, I think it was Michael or Gabriel. Those are the only two angels that are named in the New Testament. But he said, I'm coming from the presence of God. And he said, because you have not believed me, you will not be able to speak until the child comes. So Zechariah was unable to speak until the birth of John the Baptist, because that was the child who came. And so, what about Mary? How did she respond at the very beginning? Well, we're going to look at Luke chapter 1, verse 26 through 38. In fact, the story that I just told you, at least part of it, is the first part of Luke chapter 1. We read verses 1 through 4 earlier in the first part of the lecture. And then we're not going to take time to read verses 5 through 25, but that kind of is the angel who went to Zechariah and told him about that, and then the baby came, and it was John the Baptist. But at this point, actually, all we know is that his wife Elizabeth conceived, and so for 5 months she kept herself hidden. And said, verse 25, thus the Lord has done for me in these days when he looked upon me to take away my reproach among the people. What reproach? Well, the reproach of not having a child. That was not looked upon as being a blessing. Certainly it was the opposite. So God blessed her in that way. And so then in verse 26 it says, in the 6th month. Well, in the 6th month of what? In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy. In the 6th month, the angel, probably that's what I'm thinking. It could be a reference to the 6th month of the year, but based on the context, it seems to me like that would be in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy. The angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed, which is like being engaged, only a little bit more serious than modern day engagement. She was betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And he came to her, the angel Gabriel, he came to her and said, greetings, O favored one, the Lord is with you. But she was greatly troubled at the saying, why would this stranger... we've talked before about whenever people saw an angel, they always were kind of scared, because it seemed like the angel, the first thing they had to say was, fear not, many times. And so she was greatly troubled at the saying and tried to discern what sort of greeting this might be. Why would she be called a favored one? Again, we talked about the status of women in Jewish culture. They didn't grow up, feeling like they were extraordinarily special compared to their brothers. Their dads prayed, thank you God, I'm not a woman, and so forth, all those kinds of things. So why would this this strange individual, if she recognized him even as an angel still, why would he say, "O favored one, the Lord is with you"? So she's trying to figure this out. Verse 30, and the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary." There's the common phrase that angels normally have to say. "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus." And again, Jesus was not an uncommon name at that point, because, the great heroes of the Old Testament were Moses and Joshua. And Joshua, the name, like translated to Greek would have been Jesus. So there was a lot of, but nonetheless, he said, "You shall call his name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High." Most High being a reference to God, of course. The Son of the Most High. "And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." So, he is a king in a sense, not in the sense that some people were hoping or wanting, but nonetheless, this angel is telling Mary that he will be a king and reign over the house of Jacob, who is the individual whom God changed his name to Israel. So over the house of Israel forever, his kingdom, there will be no end. And Mary said to the angel, "Well, how will this be, since I am a virgin?" And the angel answered her, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God." So he's explaining to her quite, clearly that it's going to be a miracle. It's going to be something that God is going to do. It's not going to be something that could be explained in any other way other than God's power. The Holy Spirit will come upon her. The power of the Most High will overshadow her. Verse 36, "And behold, your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has also conceived a son, and this is the 6th month with her who was called barren." So the angel is using Elizabeth as an example to help Mary to understand that the truth that's expressed in verse 37, "For nothing will be impossible from God." This is one of the one of the constant themes of the Bible, both Old and New Testament, that you can just tell sometimes when you finish reading a passage. If you say, "Okay, what's the main point of this? What's the author trying to indicate?" If you believe that God, is using humans to write this, but he is, in a sense, the inspirer or the author in that sense, what is God trying to say? And it seems like many times the main point of the passage is that nothing is impossible for God. And here, that's the explicit statement made in verse 37 as this angel is talking to Mary. And he says, "Even Elizabeth, who was so old and barren, is with child and in her 6th month, for nothing's impossible for God." So he's trying to help her to believe. And here's the response from Mary. "And Mary said, Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. And the angel departed from her." So, Mary says, "I'm the servant of the Lord. If that's what he wants, that's what I'll do." So the answer to the question is, when Mary told she was to be the mother of Jesus, she responded positively at the very beginning. I would say true. You might say, "Well, didn't she also ask, how will this be since I'm a virgin?" She did. And yet, it appears to me from the context that she was basically just asking for more information. What Zechariah, her uncle, or her relative, whoever that was, somehow related, because Elizabeth is called a relative. But anyway, what Zechariah was said, "Well, how do I know this is true?" It's a little bit different to say, "How do I know this is true?" and to say, "Well, since I'm a virgin, how is this going to happen?" And so, nonetheless, I would say true that she responded positively. Now, I think that the Christian church has seen that as quite remarkable. And you tell me why. I mean, a lot of people today, have children, and that's their design. Their plan is to have children even though they're not married. And so that's a very common thing. But if you try to think back to, maybe your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents' generation, and then, go back, if you understand the biblical culture, that was not an acceptable thing to do. So what are some of the things that might have gone through Mary's mind, when this angel said, even though you're a virgin, you're going to have a child, and, what are some of the things that, all that it says here is, I'm the servant of the Lord, may it be to me according to your word. So she seems to be, a real good little girl, right? She said, if that's what God says, that's what I'll do. I trust that what you're saying is accurate. I trust you're the messenger. But what are some of the thoughts that she had to be thinking?
Probably was kind of scared.
Say it again?
So she probably was a little bit scared.
Yeah, a little bit scared. What else? I mean, birth is last Sunday, the 17th, my second daughter had her first child, and my third grandbaby was born. And just coming up to any time of a birth, you always think, what if something goes wrong? And at one point they said they were a little concerned the baby was small, like 10th percentile, and stuff like that. Well, it turned out everything was just fantastic. Everything was perfect. My wife went up, and this textbook baby, sleeping and nursing right away, and just everything is awesome. But it's scary beforehand. So there's some of that natural fear of childbirth and some of the problems that could be associated with that. But what else? Someone else?
What people would think.
Yeah, what people would think. I mean, no one's immune from that, right? My wife makes fun of me sometimes because I might be a little oversensitive to being embarrassed in front of people. And I'll admit it, I am, so we have to deal with that. And yet in this place, there's shame involved, right? People are probably going to think, yeah, right, that's lots of people have said, something crazy to make up an excuse for why they show up pregnant. And, for us, we look back, and Mary is a great hero, of course, especially within Roman Catholic Church, but even among all Protestants in general, also look at Mary as being certainly one that is looked upon with favor by God in terms of the words of the angel. And so she is certainly someone to be admired, although in the New Testament, most of what is described concerning Mary from the Roman Catholic point of view is not from the New Testament. It comes from, the teachings of the church throughout history, which the Roman Catholics see as being inerrant and without error, just like the Protestants look at the New Testament. So we have to try to distinguish between that in terms of where certain things come from if you're wanting to understand some of the differences between Roman Catholicism and the rest of the Christian church. And, I should say the Protestants, because the Orthodox Church is, their Orthodox branch is similar to Roman Catholicism. Okay, so we've got, we've got that one answered. Let's go on to another question. We talked about his birth. We talked about his boyhood a little bit because Luke mentions that story. And then, but now moving on to, very quickly, Luke then will move into his ministry. So Jesus' ministry, what did Jesus do right before announcing his choice of his 12 disciples? And who tells us about this? What did Jesus do right before announcing his choice for his 12 disciples? And who tells us about this? What did Jesus do right before announcing his choice for his 12 disciples? And who tells us about this? So we'll go ahead and just read about this, and then we'll get the answer. It's in Luke 6. Luke 6, verse 12. 12 and 13, we'll read. I think that's one sentence. No, it's separated, but... Right before announcing his choice for his 12 disciples, Luke is the only one who tells us about this, so that answers part of the question. That's why we're looking at it as we're looking at Luke. Although I think I may have mentioned it when we were talking about the selection of the 12 disciples in previous lectures, but nonetheless, we get to read it here. Luke 6, 12 and 13, we read this. In these days, he, being Jesus, went out to the mountain to pray, and all night he continued in prayer to God. So he pulled an all-nighter. You're no stranger to that. Probably most college students occasionally have to pull an all-nighter because of a research paper that you have due, right? Or an exam that you feel like you've got to study a lot for, and you feel like what you gain in study will somehow overshadow what you lose in grogginess from not sleeping, right? But I think research papers are the primary time that people have to turn it in by 8 o'clock the next morning and it's not done, and they ended up pulling an all-nighter. So Jesus stayed all night. What was he doing? He was praying, continued all night. All night he continued in prayer to God. And when when day came, he called his disciples. In other words, at this point, he just called all those who were following him, and he chose from them 12. So there were more people that were following him. He chose out of all the disciples, he chose 12 whom he named apostles. 12 learners whom he named missionaries. 12 disciples that he said gave them a special significance. And we talked before about the significance of that there were 12 tribes in ancient Israel from the Old Covenant, and Jesus came to clarify, according to the New Testament, a new covenant. And so there's that similarity or parallel from Old Testament to New Testament in terms of the significance of 12 individuals. Although these 12 individuals didn't have, families and create a nation like the 12 sons of Israel. And they're named again: Simon, whom he named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, the tax collector, Thomas, the doubter, James, the son of Alphaeus, another Simon who was called Zealous, and Judas, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot. So the two Judases are put together in this list. Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor, is listed there. So what did Jesus do before the choice of his 12 disciples, and who tells us about this? Well, Jesus, prayed all night long. That's the answer to the question. However you want to word that, he spent a night in prayer. So obviously very significant. Not something that he did casually, obviously, or lightly. Something that he thought was very important for him to choose the right people. And only Luke tells us about this. That's the answer to the question about who tells us about this. Only Luke. The other gospel writers will sometimes refer to Jesus praying. I think that it's Mark that said very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus went out to pray. That was his custom. I want to say Mark 1:35, but I haven't just looked that up, so I don't know if that's correct or not. But so we hear about Jesus praying, and then the other gospel writers tell us about the choosing of the 12. But Luke gives us the context that he had spent the previous night in prayer. All right. Next question. In the Gospels, how many reports are there of different occasions when Jesus performed miracles, including healings, exorcism, and things like walking on the water? In the Gospels, how many reports are there of different occasions when Jesus performed miracles? A math geek like me probably came up, I didn't count them up, but I do notice that I appreciate books that give me information like this. How many miracles were there? Preachers or speakers will sometimes say, Jesus did a lot of miracles in the Bible. Well, how many did he do? So in the gospel, how many reports are there of different occasions when Jesus performed miracles, including healings, exorcisms? What's an exorcism? You know that from horror movies, probably. There's some movies made about exorcisms.
Like evil spirits out of
Right.
the body.
Okay, so when a person has an evil spirit or a demon, it's the person who, casts that demon out or tells that demon to leave that person, and he does. That's called exorcisms. So in the Gospels, how many reports are there of different occasions when Jesus performed miracles, including healings, exorcisms, and things like walking on water? So these are miracles. We use the word miracle in a couple different ways. I told you that I had 8 days ago, or was it 9 days ago, my third grandchild was born, and we call birth a miracle sometimes because, it's such a happy occasion and it's such a remarkable occasion, even physiologically, and some people will call the human eye a miracle, or the human ear, or the universe, the solar system, and all the way the planets rotate, and how life is sustainable on this planet. We talk about some physiological things and we call those miracles because they're so extraordinary, but oftentimes those things are exactly what we would expect according to the laws of nature that are repeatable and predictable, right? So that's not the same. The birth of a child is not the same kind of miracle as walking on water. Because the laws of nature will say that if a person of normal weight, is released from any support above water, he will sink, right? So walking on water is a miracle. In other words, it's the laws of nature being broken. So nonetheless, that's the kind of miracle we're talking about here. Sometimes the Bible, when we get to the Gospel of John, they're called signs, S-I-G-N, signs, because they were signs indicating, something, pointing to something spectacular like signs do. Well, it's in the textbook somewhere. Did anybody find how many reports there are of different occasions of Jesus performing miracles?
35.
About 35. What page was that?
605.
605, okay. About 35. And real quick here, I want to read all 35 of them. No, I'm just kidding, since class is close to the end. Well, we'll read one. We'll read Luke 7, verses 1 through 10. Remember a couple lectures ago, I made a chart on the board about, you can still see it a little bit, about the centurion and the tribune and the legate. And I remember reading centurion a lot in the Bible. And I couldn't remember reading tribune and legate very much. Could be depending on the translation, but it could just be my bad memory, because since that point I've read about two different tribunes in Acts. And so having covered that with you, I was able to remember that, okay, this guy's over a lot, the tribune is over a lot more people than the centurion. He's over 600 people. The centurion is over only 100 people, give or take a few. So anyway, that's what we have in this passage, another reference to some of these officers within the Roman army. So I'm going to start reading it at verse 1 in Luke 7. After he had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion, again, that's not a Jewish person, right? This is a Gentile. This is someone in the Roman hierarchy, in the Roman army structure. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. This was a servant that he really liked a lot. He was a very good servant. And verse 3, when the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. Because again, word, that was the buzz, that Jesus was healing people, and it was quite extraordinary. And if you really, love someone a lot, there are a lot of people, tried to help Jesus to get them to heal their daughter, or in this case, a servant, someone that they knew and appreciated and valued a lot. Verse 4. And when they came, the elders, when they came to Jesus, the Jewish elders, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation. See, they're talking about the centurion. He loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. So here's a guy that looks at the Jewish people very favorably. I mean, sometimes the Romans and the Jewish people hated each other, but occasionally there would be a connection. And here this is a guy that think, man, look at the way these people live. I mean, they're not, they think it's very wrong. Murder and adultery are things that they think are wrong. And he just made a connection. Well, I don't know if it was the Ten Commandments or what, but he valued the Jewish people and he built their synagogue. Verse 6, and Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Probably because he was not a Jewish person and he felt like he was not worthy because, the Jewish people, he was not part of that, that group, and he associated Jesus with them, obviously. Verse 7, therefore, this is still the centurion's word, I did not presume to come to you, but just say the word and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. He's military, right? He knows how it works. That's the way it works in the military. You don't ask questions of your superiors. When they say go, you go, and so forth. And he's saying, Jesus, I know that you're the same way, that all you got to do is say the word, and this illness, he felt Jesus had authority over illness, just like a superior has authority over someone in the army, like over a private. Verse 9, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him. And he turned to the crowd that followed him and said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. So again, here's an example of a miracle that Jesus did. And there's about 35 different miracles when you kind of compare all the Gospels and put all the stories together. So we'll pick up with the next reading as we move on. Keep on reading Luke and keep on reading your textbook. And we'll pick up on Thursday. Thursday I will be here. For those of you in the classroom section, Thursday I will be here. But next Tuesday it's going to be online because I won't be here.